Thanks for listening to Lighthouse Baptist Church podcast. Lighthouse Baptist Church is an independent, fundamental Baptist church located in Pleasanton, California. This message was preached live in one of our regular church services. If you find this message a help, please feel free to subscribe. You can find out more about us at our website, lbceastbay.com. Now to the message.
Make sure your Bibles are still open there to Genesis 39, looking at the journey of faith of Joseph, and today we're looking at the journey of faith into captivity. I trust that you paid attention as we read that story. You may be very familiar with it. It may be new to you. But Joseph was given by God a vision, a dream, a revelation of one day that his family was going to bow down to him and he was going to be rulers over them as well as others. But we just left him in prison. We just left him as a slave, which had now been lied about, accused of rape, and sent into prison. Doesn't look real good for the journey of faith. But some 20 years later, let me read it for you. It's a very familiar passage, a very familiar verse, but one that always challenges me. This same Joseph that was sold as a slave, lied about, put into prison, could very well have been executed for the sins that he committed or for the crime he was accused of against Potiphar's wife, says to his brothers, years later, 20 years later, thereabouts, when he was there and his daddy died, and Joseph said unto his brothers, said unto them, Fear not, for am I in the place of God? But as for you, ye thought evil against me. But God meant it unto good, to bring to pass, as it is this day, to save much people alive. Years later, from the prison there, he was now Potiphar, or the Pharaoh's number 2 man, and God had a plan for me. You meant to do evil for me. You meant to cause me problems, but God meant it for good, and I'm in the place of God. So we're looking at Joseph going from his father's house, being sold as a slave, down into prison, into then being number 2 in all Egypt, and saying at the end of his life, toward the end of his life, I am in the place of God. That's the journey of faith. If he'd messed up along the way, he would not have ended up where he was. If he'd have given up along the way, he would not have ended up where he was. God had a place for him 20 years after this. I'm challenging you today, God's got a plan for your life. God's got a place for your life, but the only way we're going to get that is to journey by faith. Our theme this year is by faith. So we're reviewing this idea that we're on a journey of faith and his journey of faith. Remember, his journey of faith began from a very dysfunctional family. Yes, it was God's family. Yes, it was the one God promised to bring this Messiah through, but it was a very dysfunctional home. In fact, we're not going to read it, but I want you to go home and read it when you get a chance, chapter 38. Chapter 38 will, if I can say it politely, it can make you sick. The wickedness, the immorality of Joseph's brother Judah. It's just an amazing story that it would be that wicked, that vile, that so easy to let sin come into life. So we're not going to read it, but I want you to challenge to read it because it gives us a contrast between his brother and him. By the way, you cannot use your brother's immorality for excuse for your immorality. Are you listening to me? You can't use your family's problem for your problem. You can't blame your father, your grandfather, your parents, even your other brothers or sisters because of their sin or because of what they've done in their life to say, I cannot serve God, I cannot follow God, because we are all free agents, amen, and God has a plan and purpose for us, and we have the ability to, by God's grace, to follow his plan. So it came from a very dysfunctional home, poor parenting, poor examples, favoritism, bitterness, and hatred. We saw him persecuted for the Word of God, cast into a pit, sold into slavery, daddy convinced that he was dead, and now at 17 he begins this journey of faith, this life of faith, going from a wealthy man, the son of a wealthy man, the favorite son of a wealthy man, to a slave, and from there into prison. His journey of faith at this point, on the outward look, is a journey downward into captivity. Can he make it? How will he make it to be in the place of God some 20 years later when he finds himself right here? So here's the challenge for us. Here's the key lesson today. A journey of faith. Listen, for you, for me, a journey of faith depends upon and is demonstrated by one key word, faithfulness. To live a life of faith, to finish your journey of faith, it all hinges upon faithfulness. Faithfulness, in fact, to God. It depends upon that very concept. Joseph was faithful to his father, but that wasn't what kept him going. Joseph was faithful to his masters, even as a slave. Yes, he was, but that did not keep him going. He was faithful to himself, yes, but the key was, it all stemmed from the fact he was faithful to his God. So if you and I are going to make it on our journey of faith, instead of saying, well, it's going to depend a lot upon my church, your church is there to help, but I guarantee it's going to depend on your faithfulness to God. You say, well, it's all going to depend on what our nation does. No, it does not depend on what our nation does. It depends on our faithfulness to God. A journey of faith hinges on our faithfulness. You say, preacher, I'd rather depend it upon luck. It doesn't happen that way. I'd rather depend it upon pleasure. It doesn't happen that way. It depends upon faithfulness. So if you and I are going to finish our journey of faith, so we can say at the end of our life, I'm in the place of God, it all hinges upon us making our faithfulness to God our paramount duty. The duty of our life, the purpose of our life, the desire of our life, the dedication of our life to be faithful to God. So we need to leave here this morning saying, I'm just going to be faithful to Him. Regardless of what happens, regardless of what else goes on, I'm going to be faithful to Him because that is the journey of faith. We read this story here and we read about Joseph, and if you've been saved very long or read your Bible very much, you say, it's not that bad of a story. It's not that bad of a story because we know the end. It's not that bad of a story because we know God is taking care of him. It's not that bad of a story because we know what happens at the end. But Joseph at the time, he had no idea what was going to happen. As far as he knew, he was there in prison and maybe soon to have his head beheaded, maybe go to more torture because of what he was accused of. But he was faithful to God. So, we're looking this morning at Joseph's journey of faith into captivity. Most of us will spend some part of our life in some form of captivity. We'll have some sense of captivity. We may not find ourselves in jail, but we may. Jesus tarries his coming and persecution. We may find ourselves in jail for the cause of Christ. But that's not the only sense of captivity we may sense. He's obviously there in captivity as a slave, captivity there in jail and in prison. But there's many times we, in our lives, feel like we're in captivity. Captivity means we're in a position we did not choose. It means we're in a position that we did not desire. It means we're in a position that we have no control of, a position that we just not pleasing to ourselves, and it's a position that we just can't get out of. Anybody ever been there? I know that you have. If not, you're looking forward to one that is coming. It may be a job situation. In your job, you say, I feel like I'm in captivity. It's a job I don't like. It's a job that's bothering me. It's a job that's hard for me. It's a job I just don't feel I can get out. And you feel like you're stuck in the job because you've got responsibilities or you've got debts and things like that. It may be an area of your life where it's health. In your health, you feel like you're in captivity. You can't get out. You didn't choose it. You didn't go anywhere to do that. You didn't do anything to cause that, but you feel trapped in your health. You feel trapped and you're looking ahead. You say, I don't see any joy coming out of this. I don't see anything good out of coming out. And you feel like you're in captivity. It may be a marriage that's gone bad. It's unfortunate, but it does happen. One or both spouses begin to get involved in things they should not, and divisions come, and a marriage may go bad. Even for a Christian home, one spouse may decide to go a little different track, have some issues in their life, and a big division begins to come, and a little anger and bitterness comes, and in that marriage, you are there because you're a Christian. You say, I'm staying. Hello. Amen. You say, because I'm a Christian, I'm staying. It may not be the happiest place, but this is where I am, and this is where God has me. So a marriage may have gone bad, and you say, boy, I feel like I'm in captivity. There's no joy. There's no peace. I can't seem to figure out how to get out. I did not choose it. I didn't do anything to get there, but I'm in captivity. It may be your kids go bad. Oh, you raise up godly kids as best you can, and your children get into sin and find themselves in all kinds of messes, and you then bearing that weight as a parent, and you say, boy, I just feel like I'm in captivity. I feel bound, I feel troubled, I feel tortured, this is not where my life was going to go. This is not what I wanted to do. This is not how I was. And you begin to feel in captivity. You may end up, as I said, in prison. By the way, most places in the world, Christians spend some time in prison. If you're going to stand for the cause of Christ, if you're going to give the gospel out, if you're going to pray in public, if you're going to raise your kids in a godly home, many places Christians are still tortured and put into prison. So we may find ourselves in prison for standing this old book, but you definitely know that you're in prison, and you'll feel in captivity. But the idea of being in captivity, you feel stuck, stagnant, wondering why things aren't happening. Now the danger is we quit when we get there. When we quit, we say, I'm not going to go any farther. I'm not going to follow God anymore. I'm just going to kind of wait things out, or I'm going to detour and take things into my own hand and do things normally you would not, so that you can get out, if you will, of that captivity. So when you're stuck, when you've been following God, when you've been obeying God, and you're stuck and you're in that captivity, how should a child of God react? That's what this journey of faith is. I believe I've got it there. You know, it's 1 Corinthians 7:20. Just by way of introduction, there's a long introduction, and you're waiting for me to say a short message. There's a message to follow, all right? In 1 Corinthians 7, it says, is that in your notes this morning? Or notice what it says. Let every man abide in the same calling wherein he was called. Art thou called being a servant? In other words, a slave? Care not for it? It says you don't like it? But if thou mayest be free, use it rather. For he that is called in the Lord, being a servant, is the Lord's free man. Likewise also, he that is called, being free, is Christ's servant. Ye are bought with a price. Be not ye the servants of men. Brethren, let every man wherein is called, in other words, wherever you find yourself, if you're a slave, it says, then you're Christ's freeman. If you're free, you're Christ's servant. He said, however you find yourself, however God has placed you, it's not that you've got yourselves into sin and got yourself into a mess, but however God has placed you, brethren, let every man wherein is called, therein abide with God. What we need to do when we feel like we're in captivity and we're in a situation that I don't like and I don't understand, we say, but I'm going to let God abide with me, and I'm going to abide with God. I'm just going to stick with God. You say, but preacher, I feel trapped. Stick with God. But preacher, this is not happy like I wanted. Stick with God. I don't know how I'm going to get out of this. Just stick with God. That's the key of being faithful to God while we're in captivity. So at the end of our life, at the end of our life of faith and journey of faith, we can say, I know I'm in the place of God. Don't bail out. Don't quit. Just abide with God. In fact, it says 4 times in this chapter, God was with Joseph. In all his mess, in all his lies, in all his accusations, and all the falsehoods, and all his... God was with Joseph. So this morning we'll look the journey of faith into captivity. You may not be in captivity, you may feel like it, but don't blow it because you're there. Joseph could have blown it. He could have blown it with Potiphar's wife. He could have blown it in prison. He could have blown it anywhere along the way, but he had faith in God. So as you go through your captivity, don't forget the end potential. Don't forget the lives you may save. That's what Joseph said. You meant it for evil, but God meant it for good, and He brought me in this place that I saved many people. He was able to save a whole nation and thousands of people from starvation because God had him in that place. So let's hold on to our faith. In captivity, in the trials, in the difficulties, in the heartaches, hold on to your faith. You may not need it today. Some are needed today. You may need it next week, next month, next year. But let's learn this morning about how to have our journey of faith into captivity. Now, we know He comes out at the other side. But when you go into it, you may not think you'll ever get out. You may not ever get out this side of heaven. But we'll still need to have our journey of faith. And the key is faithful to God. Staying faithful to God. Preacher, how can I have a journey of faith? Stay faithful to Him. Stay faithful to God. Very quickly, let's notice the journey of faith into captivity. How do we do it? Very quickly. Number 1, are you with me this morning? Boy, I'm trying to help you because you'll blow it. You'll get tied up and feel like you're not going anywhere or doing anything, and you'll feel like you're in captivity, bad marriage, bad kids, bad something, and you'll blow it because you're not faithful to God. Very quickly. Number 1, how do I do it? Stay faithful to God in your downward plight. Stay faithful to God in your downward plight. Look at chapter 39, verse number 1. And Joseph was brought down to Egypt. Boy, I tell you what, when you start getting messed up, when you start getting in captivity, you feel like you're just going down. Has your life ever felt like it was going downhill? Boy, it does. Sometimes you say, this is going down. And when you go downhill, things go faster and faster. And that's what it was. He was brought down. He's got a downward plight. Again, he was Daddy's favorite son, a wealthy dad, his favorite son, all kinds of things to look forward to. But his brothers hated him because of God's vision in his life, and now he finds himself as a slave, and then from a slave in the prison, being accused of an immoral, wicked sin. His life was downhill at this point. How do you stay faithful to God in a downward plight? How do you stay faithful to God when all of a sudden you've lost your job, you've been accused of this or that, or your spouse has been unfaithful? How in the world do you stay faithful to God in a downward plight? Very, very quickly. Number one, by faith in a divine plan. Keeping your faith in a divine plan. A divine what, class? Plan. Talk to me. A divine what? A divine plan. God has a plan. Aren't you glad God has a plan? And so I have faith in the fact that God has a plan for my life. And I've got it there, I believe, in your notes, at least some of it. In Jeremiah 4:29, verse number 10, it says, "For thus saith the Lord." And he's telling them about the captivity he's going to take them in. Remember, the children of Israel were going to go into captivity for 70 years. They were going to be slaves for 70 years. That means a generation or two of people were going to be slaves. He was chastening them. It says, "For thus saith the Lord, that after 70 years be accomplished at Babylon, I will visit you and perform my good word towards you in causing you to return to this place." He said, "I'm going to send you to captivity for 70 years. But after that, he said, I'm going to go visit you and bring you back to this place. For I have known the thoughts that I think towards you." He said, because I got a plan. He said, "I've got some thoughts, saith the Lord, thoughts of peace and not of evil, to give you an expected end." God has an expected end for your life. God has an expected purpose for your life. And He's got that thought out. He's got that plan. And it's a wonderful plan for us, but we have to have faith in the plan. So as those folks in Israel went to captivity, they'd say, God's going to bring us out of here. Or he said, talk to their kids or their grandkids, says, God's going to take you out of here. Stay right, have faith in the divine plan. Much like Job said. Job says, "But he knoweth the way that I take." Job says, "I can't find God. I look to my right, look to my left, I can't see him. But he knoweth the way that I take. When he hath tried me, I shall come forth as gold. My foot hath held his steps. His way have I kept and not declined. Neither have I gone back from the commandment of his lips." He said, he knows the way that I take. He said, I can't see God working around me right now. He said, but he knows the way that I take. He knows the path I'm on. He said, and so what's amazing, he says, my foot hath held his steps. His way have I kept and not declined. Neither have I gone back from the commandment of lips. In other words, he says, I just stayed right with God. I would have faith in God, and I believed God, and I was faithful to God, even in my trials. If you know what was going on with Job's life, he lost his money, he lost his kids, he lost his health, he had friends that were criticizing him, he was scraping pussy sores off his body, and he says, still, he said, I can't see God working. He said, but I kept my faith, I kept on the path, I kept walking, I kept being faithful to God in the trials. So when you and I feel captive, when you and I feel like our life is going down the drain, when things aren't going like we thought, be faithful to God by just having faith in the divine plan, that God has a plan. Which goes with that, number two, with faith in a directed providence. With faith in a directing providence. In other words, God's not just sitting there watching to see what happens. God is directing things in our lives. Are you with me this morning? Somehow we got the idea, if it doesn't satisfy my flesh, if it doesn't make me happy, if it doesn't make me more prosperous, if it doesn't make me more healthy, then God has lost control. No, God is still in control. He directs things in our lives. And that's what Joseph said at the end of life. You meant it for evil, but God meant it for good. I believe it's there in your notes. It says in Romans 8:28, and we know this passage, but we misunderstand that passage. And we know that all things work together for good. There's no period there. We want to put a period there. All things work together for good. There's no period there. All things work together to whom? To them that love God. to them who are the called according to His purpose. The only way we can claim that all things work together for good is if we love God. And what did Jesus say? If you love me, keep my commandments. Well, I'm not keeping God's commandments, I'm doing my own way. So God, I'm expecting you to make everything come good. No. All things work together for good to them who love God, to them who are the called according to His purpose. So the only way I can really claim that promise that for myself, that all things work together for good, is if I'm loving God, in other words, I'm obeying Him, and I'm fulfilling His purpose in my life. If I'm not fulfilling His purpose in my life right now, I cannot claim, God, you said all things work together for good for me. No, doesn't happen. Now, somebody next to you who's suffering the same way, good to them because they're loving God and doing what He says. And so Joseph had that idea. He's just following God. All things work together for good. His prison, he got into prison so he could meet the butler and the baker, so he could end up in Pharaoh, so he could save many people alive. It was God directing. It was the providence of God directing in his life. So if we want to claim all things work together for good, we better be loving God and better be fulfilling His purpose in our lives. Wow. Stay faithful to God in our downward plights. Say, preacher, you don't know. People call me very often, just lost my job. Stay faithful to God. Well, the doctor said it's going to be cancer and I'm not going to be faithful to God. My kids just did this. My spouse just did this. And this can be faithful to God. Why? Because I'm on a journey of faith. I have to be faithful to God. Be faithful to God in the downward plight. Secondly, we need to stay faithful to God through divine promotions. Through divine promotion. In other words, in Joseph's downward spiral of his life, there's a little upward swing. Don't you like it when you get a little upward swing when things are going bad? I mean, he's still a slave, but it takes an upward turn. He was a slave. He was sold as a slave. I don't know, maybe he was just a slave to wash chariots. I don't know what it was. But he got in there and old Potiphar said, this guy's smart. This guy, God is with this guy. What he does, God blesses. And so he worked him up and promoted him to be in charge of everything that he had. It says he didn't even know what he had except what he sat down for dinner. He said, I have no idea. He just let Joseph do it all. So Joseph was promoted. And so that, though he was still a slave, he had a promotion. He was going upscale again. He had no doubt had more liberty and more freedom and more possessions, if you will, or at least some more things in his life that were well-pleasing. And so God promoted him in that. When God brings that little upswing, listen, when God begins to work good, if you will, quote unquote, that we like in our lives, stay faithful to God. Are you listening to me? Stay faithful when it's downward. Stay faithful when it's upward. I've actually seen, probably if I really sat down and figured it, more people who got away from God when things went up than when they went down. Because when we go down, we say, God, I need your help. God, I need your help. I want all things to work together for good because things aren't working so good right now. I want all things to work together for me. He says, so I'm going to love you and so I'm going to obey you and I'm going to do your purpose. But things begin to turn up and we stop being faithful. Joseph had a little upturn. He might have said, this is going all right. I'm in control of all the money. I'm in control of all the people. Oh, boy. But he was still faithful to God. Let me help you with something. Promotions and blessings come with their own temptations and problems. Are you listening? Promotions and blessings come with their own temptations and problems. In fact, look at verse number 7. So he's promoted up. He's now number one in the house. He's just taking care of things. He's running things over there at the house, still as a slave, but he's the master slave, and he's running things. Verse number 7. And it came to pass after these things that his master's wife cast her eyes upon Joseph and said, lie with me. A new temptation came. A new trial came after he was promoted. If he'd been just out there shoveling manure and taking care of the chariots, he may not have ever had that. But now he's in a higher position. Now he's cleaned up. Now no doubt he's wearing better clothes because he's in and out with the master. And he's being seen by people and he runs across these people. And there's more temptation that comes. I see it in people's lives, Christians' lives. They begin to make a little extra money so they can travel some more. They make a little extra money so they can buy more. They come across people they would have never come across before. They begin to influence by people they would normally never have been underneath. And all those bring added temptations. Listen, stay faithful. Preacher, how in the world can I get over here at the end of my life? My journey of faith put me where I know I'm in the place of God. When your life takes a downturn, stay faithful to God. When your life takes an upturn, stay faithful to God. If you blow it when you're going down, you're not going to be in the place of God. If you blow it while it's going up, you're not going to be in the place of God. Be faithful to God. I've known many Christians that have been put on the shelf, gone away, because they've been tempted and seduced by the blessings of God. Just because they've been blessed. God warned them when they went into the promised land in Deuteronomy 8. He said, I'm going to take you into the promised land. He said, you're going to live in houses you did not build. You're going to eat crops that you did not plant. And God said, He warned them, He said, lest when thou hast eaten and art full, and hast built goodly houses, and dwelt therein, and when thy herds and thy flocks multiply, and thy silver and thy gold is multiplied, and all that thou hast is multiplied. He said, watch out. He said, when everything's going good, when your gold and your silver and your flocks and your house and all that, then thy heart be lifted up, and thou forget the Lord thy God. He said, watch out. You forget me. A little later on he says, but thou shalt remember the Lord thy God. It is He that giveth thee power to get wealth, that He may establish His covenant. Oh my. But we live in a society right now where we are so blessed and we forget God. We forget where we came from. We forgot who's giving us everything and who can take it back. In his prosperity and in his poverty and in his prosperity again. Serving God as a 17-year-old in his daddy's house. Faithful to God as a slave. Top dog slave, still faithful to God. Then it just got worse. Into prison, but stayed faithful to God. God says in 1 Timothy 6, charge them that are rich in this world, in other words, things are going well, that they do not charge them that are rich in this world, that they be not high-minded, nor trust in uncertain riches, but in the living God, who giveth richly all things to enjoy, that they do good, that they be rich in good works. He said, tell the rich not to trust in their riches, but to keep serving God. Keep doing right. Keep obeying God. Keep doing the things you're supposed to do. So, preacher, how in the world am I supposed to end my captivity when I feel like I'm a slave, when I feel like I'm bound? My marriage and my kids and whatever it is, things aren't happening. I just don't have any control. Stay faithful to God. When you're downward plight, stay faithful to God. When you begin to get blessings and you begin to get promotion, stay faithful to God. If you're going to end up in the place of God. Number 3. Not just in your downward plight, but stay faithful to God in our divine promotion, but also stay faithful through despicable propositions. Stay faithful through despicable propositions. I'm talking about temptation to sin. Here we have Potiphar's wife. She lays eyes on him. Oh, what a good-looking fella he was. He was a goodly-looking young man, and she put her eyes on him, and she wanted to have an affair with him, and she tried to get him to be immoral with her. Our temptations don't always have to be as overt as that one. But the devil will proposition you. The devil will offer things to you. The devil will entice you and I to leave the things of God. So it may not be an overt temptation like this. It may be just an advertisement on the television. It may be a little portion of the web page that comes up that makes you want to click on it. It may be an ad. It may be lingering thoughts. It may be just dissatisfaction in a marriage or dissatisfaction with your life. But temptations are going to come. And it's despicable. It's dirty. It's debauched. It's vile. And that's what she says, come lie with me. Preacher, what do I do when the temptations are strong? Stay faithful to God. Hello? Stay faithful to God. God's trying to warn us about this. We're going to end up over there. Temptations are going to come, and the devil's going to make sure they come. We need to be faithful to him. Now, what's interesting is his temptation. Listen, his temptation came from someone who was tempted. We never think about it from her side. She saw him. Well, what about Potiphar? Oh, he's too busy. He doesn't care about me. He's always taking care of the king. He's always out on business. He's always going to battle. He's always doing this. And I'm lonely here in the house, and he's never around. And look at that young man. She was tempted. And her temptation became his temptation. Oh, there's much more we could go into, but just be careful. Be careful. Fellas, be careful when a lady wants to talk about her marriage to you. Ladies, be careful when a man wants to talk his marriage to you. Be careful. Be careful. When people come talking about their temptations, be careful. He was tempted because she was tempted. Notice what it says. Verse number 7, and it came to pass after these things. Here's a danger. I'm trying to help us. I'm trying to keep your marriage together. I'm trying to keep our lives straight. I'm trying to keep us to get a life on a journey of faith. It says, and it came to pass after these things that his master's wife cast her eyes upon Joseph. She cast her eyes. Here's the question. What are you casting your eyes on? What are you casting your eyes on? What are you looking for? What are you looking at? She just didn't seem, she cast her eyes. She saw him once and she looked some more. She saw him once and she looked longer. She saw him once and began to cast her eyes on him, began to focus on watching him and thinking about him. She's casting her eyes on him. Ladies and gentlemen, we need to watch out where we're casting our eyes. We need to control our eyes. I know that sounds old-fashioned. I know that sounds silly, but I guarantee it, you find yourself in a mess because you have not kept track, not controlled your eyes. The old expression is, you can't stop a bird from landing on your head, but you can prevent it from making a nest there. All right? Say, oh, I saw that, but you don't have to cast your eyes upon it. I saw that, but you don't have to look again. I saw her, I saw him, but you don't have to look again. The problem comes when we begin to cast our eyes. What are you casting your eyes on? Are you casting your eyes on the things of the world? Are you casting your eyes upon smut? Are you casting your eyes on pornography? Are you casting your eyes on... Ladies and gentlemen, we have to be careful how we cast our eyes. She cast her eyes, and that brought her a temptation, which put him into temptation. Also, as she said, come and lie with me. Where are you casting your eyes? You got your eyes on riches or on possessions? All through the Bible, it warns us about casting our eyes. Some of the great problems and issues in the Bible came because what people saw, what people looked at. Eve, when the woman saw that the tree was good. In pre-flood times, and the sons of God saw the daughters of men that they were fair. Lot lifted up his eyes and beheld the plain of Jordan. Achan, when he stole the Babylonish garment. And I saw among the spoils a goodly Babylonish garment. David, and it came to pass at eventide that David arose from off his bed and walked upon the roof of the king's house. From the king's roof he saw a woman washing herself. Jesus warned us, and I say unto you that whosoever looketh on a woman to lust after her hath committed adultery already in his heart. So as she cast her eyes and began to lust after him and then tried to tempt him, it reminds us we have to watch out where we cast our eyes. Men, keep your eyes to yourself. 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 Keep that filthy thought out of your mind and heart and keep your eyes on your own business. Keep your... Hello? Oh, but preacher, it's not going to hurt. If you want to end in your place of God, you better be faithful to God, even with the despicable propositions. When the world says, look at this, look at that, look at this, look at this. Jesus said, if you look upon a woman to lust after, you committed adultery already in the heart. Keep your eyes to yourself. Ladies and men, let's get down to where the rubber meets the road, as McGee would used to say. Don't be one to draw people's eyes. Don't be one to draw people's eyes to immorality, to wrong thinking. Men, keep your eyes to yourself. If you want to look at something, look at their face. Look at their face. But let's don't live our lives or dress to draw one's eyes inappropriately. Say, what are you talking about? Proverbs 7:10. And behold, there met him a woman with the attire of a harlot and subtle of heart. If you were watching a show or walking down the street in parts of Oakland or San Francisco, you'd say, I believe that's a harlot. How do you know? By the way she's dressed. Of course, it's getting harder and harder now because Christians are dressing the same way. Let's do not draw eyes as we should not. So she was dressed, here's a woman dressed as a harlot. Jezebel. Doesn't say anything about her dress, but it says how she painted her face. In 2 Kings 9:30, and when Jehu came to Jezreel, Jezebel heard of it, and she painted her face and tied her head. In other words, she got her hair up in a nice hairdo and painted her face. I don't think she looked like Bozo the Clown, all right? I think she had that attire, you know, with the special eyelashes and special paint that goes up here and special lips, and boy, just painted her face. You know, I'm not preaching against makeup. That old expression, if the barn needs painting, paint it. All right, but you want to make sure that it's not alluring or temptuous. How many know the difference between you can look at some lady who has some nice makeup on versus a lady who's trying to dress to allure and look like a harlot? Let's don't go that way. Let's do not be them. Psalm 101 verse 3, I will set no wicked thing before my eyes. I hate the work of them that turn aside. Job said, I made a covenant with mine eyes. Why then should I think upon a maid? I'm just saying this whole world right now, how filthy it is, how wicked it is. We have to be on guard to keep our minds right and our hearts right and our eyes right. She cast her eyes upon him, and she became tempted, and then she began to tempt him. So I don't know what proposition the devil's bringing to you today, but you've got to be careful if we're going to end in the place of God. It may be as simple as just skipping church. Come look at this. Come do this. You don't need to go to church. Boy, you need to be in tonight's message as we look at some things God's going to help us with. But you can be tempted and drawn away. Watch out for despicable propositions very quickly. He was tempted with delight. He was tempted with delight. No doubt she was probably a very nice-looking lady because she was married to a very influential man, very powerful man. And so she lusted after him, and she says, come lie with me. So he was tempted with delight. Hebrews 11:25 tells us about Moses choosing rather to suffer affliction with the people of God than to enjoy the pleasures of sin for a season. God says sin is pleasurable. For a while. If it wasn't, if sin was like like having a root canal, we wouldn't have any problem with sin. Come on, let's have a root canal. I don't think so. Come on. I've got a cabinet, and we're going to have a root canal party. And everybody will say, no, I'm not going to do that. But it's pleasurable. It's pleasurable. He was tempted with delight. He was tempted deliberately. We must hurry. He was tempted deliberately. Satan is the tempter. Don't think it just happens. Don't think it just happenstance. But we are tempted deliberately. He was tempted daily, ongoing. It says, and day by day. Verse number 5, and it came to pass from that time that he made him overseer of his house. Verse 7, and it came to pass after these things that his master's wife cast her eyes upon Joseph. She said, lie with me. And he refused and said unto his master's wife, he said all those things. Verse 10, and it came to pass as she spake unto Joseph day by day that he hearkened not unto her. Boy, it was just ongoing temptation. That's why we can't let down. That's why you can't give up. You just have to be on guard all the time. He was tempted daily. He was tempted all the time. How to be in the place of God. The journey of faith, being faithful to God. Faithful to God. Being faithful to God in your downward plights. Being faithful to God in divine promotion. Being faithful to God in the despicable propositions. This whole world wants you to sin. Don't go there. How can we do that? Stay faithful to God with dedicated purity. And we'll be done momentarily. Stay faithful to God with dedicated purity. Joseph had dedicated himself to purity. He said, I'm not going to give in because I've already dedicated myself to purity. Again, what a tremendous difference between chapters 38 with Judah and chapter 39 with Joseph. You go back and read about Judah and his daughter-in-law who pretended to be a prostitute, and he went into her and then came and was an illegitimate child. Just a mess. Just a mess. To chapter 39 where Joseph says, no, I can't do that. Let's decide I want to be like Joseph and not like Judah. Dedicated, determined, purity. Very quickly, he resisted temptation decisively. Decisively. Verse 7, and it came to pass after these things that his master's wife cast her eyes upon Joseph, and she said, lie with me. But he said, not today. Is that what it says? Well, I probably ought not. But he, what class? Verse 8, he what? Verse 8, but he what? Verse 8, but he refused. He didn't say maybe another time. He didn't say maybe just. He said no. No way, Jose. No, 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 no. I'm not going to. He refused. He said, I'm not going to talk about it. We're not going to dicker about it. We're not going to wait. He didn't say this is not a good time. He didn't say I don't think it's appropriate today. We might get caught today. He refused. He said no. Ladies and gentlemen, if we're going to have victory over temptation, we have to flatly and just decidedly say no to it. When the pornography starts to come up, we say no. When somebody comes and addresses us trying to get us to go a certain place, we say no. When the old flesh says you ought to do this, we ought to say no. Decisively, you say, well, that's old-fashioned. I don't know about being old-fashioned, but I do know in my life I want to end up over here in the place of God. And if I'm not careful when temptation comes, if I don't decidedly refuse it, then I'm not going to end up over here. And so we find I'm going to be faithful to God. He was faithful to God by being dedicated and determined to be pure. He resisted decisively. He refused. Proverbs 1:10, my son, if sinners entice thee, consent thou not. Man, just don't do it. Flee, 2 Timothy 2, flee also youthful lusts and follow righteousness. He resisted the temptation decisively. Just said no. Just no. Only, by the way, only you can do that for yourself. God's not going to make you. Say, I want to be faithful to God. He did it decisively. He resisted temptation, here we go, with discernment. With discernment. Here's the key. Look at verse number 9. Verse 8, but he refused and said unto his master's wife, behold, my master wanteth not what is with me in the house. He hath committed all that he hath to my hand. There is none greater in this house than I, neither hath he kept back anything from me but thee, because thou art his wife. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God? He had enough discernment to say, this is wicked and a sin against God. I don't know, but maybe the next time somebody says, hey, how about a beer? You could say, wicked! I'm not going to sin against God. Don't ask me again. I'm not saying you should say that, but maybe if they keep coming, you can. You say, let me share something with you. No, it's wicked and it's a sin against God. I'm not going to do it. Don't ask me again. He said, this is a sin against God. This is wicked. This is wicked. The world says things aren't so bad. The world says it's okay to shack up. The world says it's okay to cohabitate. The world says it's okay to get a little drunk. God says no. He had discernment. Be faithful to God with determined purity. He resisted temptation with discernment. That means he knew it was wicked. It was a sin against God. And also he learned how to avoid temptation, or he tried to. Romans 13:14 says, put ye on the Lord Jesus Christ and make not provision for the flesh to fulfill the lust thereof. He says, don't make it easy for the flesh. We find that we read on here, it says, verse number 10, and it came to pass, as she spake to Joseph day by day, that he hearkened not unto her to lie with her or to be with her. In other words, he says he was doing his best to avoid her completely. If she was in the house, he wasn't going to go there. If he was by, he said, I'm not going to lie with her. He said, I'm not even going to get close to her because I know the temptation and I know what's going to happen. How did it happen? It came later. He was going about his business and all the other fellows were out of the house. But he was not making provision for the flesh. He was trying to avoid temptation very quickly. He resisted temptation diligently. Diligently. She came at him day by day, and every day by day he made sure he wasn't there. He avoided. He did not, the temptations weren't letting up, and he wasn't going to give in for one moment. Boy, you just have to be at it all the time. All the time. Not just once, not just twice, but all the time. If we're going to stay faithful so we can finish our journey of faith. And lastly, stay faithful when dispatched to prison. Stay faithful when dispatched to prison. So she lied about it. She cried out, said, looky here, here's what he did. Master came home and said, he tried to molest me, and I've got his coat here to prove it. So he put him in prison. It's amazing, just God's care. Either Potiphar kind of knew about his wife a little bit, or he was just a movement of God. He didn't have him killed, but just put him into prison. But we read about while he's in prison, verse 21, but the Lord was with Joseph and showed him mercy and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. And the keeper of the prison committed to Joseph's hand all the prisoners that were in the prison. He made him a trustee of trustees. And whatsoever they did thereof, he was the doer of it. The keeper of the prison looked not to anything that was under his hand, because the Lord was with him. The only way the Lord was going to be with him is if Joseph was with the Lord. He was just even in prison. It went from bad to worse to worster. But he stayed faithful. He stayed faithful. Let me help you with something. No matter what happens, be faithful to God, and He'll stay right with you. He will stay with you. I think it's there in your notes. Psalm 139, verse 7, will be done. Whithersoever shall I go from thy spirit? He said, where can I go and you not be there? Or whither shall I flee from thy presence? If I ascend into heaven, thou art there. If I make my bed in hell, behold, thou art there. If I take the wings of the morning and dwell in the uppermost parts of the sea, even there shall thy hand lead me, and thy right hand shall hold me. In other words, no matter where I go, no matter what's happening, He's there to lead me. Preacher, what do? I'm really in a mess. My life has taken a downturn. I'm in captivity. I feel like I'm in prison. I feel like I just don't know what's going to happen. Just be faithful, because even in the deepest of prison or in the highest of hills, He said, your hand is there to lead me. Just be faithful to God. A journey of faith. I hope you're living a journey of faith. But it keys on being faithful to God. Simple as that. What does God want me to do? I'm going to do it. But it's tough out there, but I'm going to be faithful to God. Things are looking up. I'm going to stay faithful to God. Things are going down. I'm going to stay faithful to God. Temptation is so strong around me, but I'm going to stay faithful to God. Oh, it just got worse. I tried to do right, and it got worse. Be faithful to God. Why? Because on the journey of faith, I want to end up over there where He says, I'm in the place of God. Let's bow our heads, please.
Thanks again for listening to Lighthouse Baptist Church Podcast. Find out more about us at our website, lbceastbay.com. I hope you can visit again real soon.